What a nice sight. And what a wonderful national anthem. I've never heard anywhere near so beautiful a rendering of the national anthem. Well done, all of you, not least those who are around there. You know, I feel so at home here when I come that I'm going to start by saying what I love saying in other places too. No protocols observed. Hi, Caesar. Hi, Vincent. Hi, Carol. Hi. That's how it is here, I sense. A flat pyramid of good people working together. Thank you, Strathmore, for having provoked me to reflect on the early influences in my life in relation to your theme this year, which I was told about, caring for our common home. And within that, the emphasis on business sustainability and the impact of leadership on such issues. The reflecting helped me explore what shaped my values, attitudes, and behavior as I interacted with a wide variety of individuals and societies in my youth, and later how this led me to try and influence the environment around me, including these two characters, in ways that make us all care for our home in sustainable ways. In my formative years, at home and at school and at university, within the communities within which I found myself, I experienced negligible waste of energy on discrimination or unproductive conflict. In all our diversity, irrespective of race or religion or other identifying aspect that differentiated us, my assumption was that our home was our common home, where we would all coexist, each in our own way, with our own talents, making our own contributions. Let me go back to when I was a young boy in the late 1940s in immediate post-World War II London. What are you laughing at? Where there was food rationing. And my mother had to queue for our allocation of powdered milk and powdered eggs. It was surely a time not to waste food. My parents and I had arrived in the UK in February of 1948 as immigrants, and it was a time of frugality, of leanness for everyone. My parents were both from Romania, so if we had Romanians here like you in French, I could address them in Romanian. It was the first language I spoke. So my parents, being from Romania and being Jewish, they fled from the country in 1941 as the fascist government there, supported by the Nazis, were the absolute opposite of caring for a common home. My mother and my father each made their way to what was then the British Mandate of Palestine, where they met and married. I was born to them in Haifa in 1945, and then and now Haifa was the most liberal of towns, with several of my parents' closest friends there being Arabs. The World War was not yet over, so I arrived before the baby boom kicked in. My generation was called the silent ones, as we were known just to do as we were told, whether in the factory or the fields or in the frontline trenches. We moved to London just before I turned 3, joining my father's elder brother and his family. And as many immigrants at that time, we were so grateful for the care shown to us by the host community that we became great patriots for Britain. The British cared for us, and we appreciated their care. My father's career relaunched very well, and by the time he retired in the late 1960s, this outlier Jewish immigrant in an otherwise white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, WASP, known as WASP environment, had become the head of their worldwide management training division. Shell was way ahead of its time in nurturing a globally diverse and inclusive culture of learning and growth. And one of my father's closest colleagues at that time, for a while, there for wider exposure, was then Shell's personnel manager for Kenya, Nick Muriuki, a wonderful gentleman, now the late. I could tell you much more about him and me. Another was Charles Handy, that many of you will have heard of, Caesar is nodding, who later became a global management guru and founded the Sloan Masters program at the London Business School, from which, as it happens, I graduated in 1974 with its 6th cohort. I later got to know Charles Handy myself and to learn from him personally, including when he was coming here, which he did a couple of times. In his 1989 book, The Age of Unreason, he summed up the emerging trend in Western workplaces as a half times 2 times 3. Seeing that companies were tending to employ half the number of people they used to, expecting twice the output from them, in exchange for which they were being paid 3 times as much. Half times 2 times 3. In the 80s, we were already seeing the transformative interrelated effects of globalism, liberalism, and technology, and its consequences on the need for educated and mobile knowledge workers. But no one had described the brave new world of survival of the fittest as succinctly as Handy, who worried before many that so many people, the other half, would be woefully unfit to meet the needs associated with more and more of the world's modern-day jobs. That was in the 1980s. I wonder what his figure would be today. He's still alive, he's in his 90s. Let me add that in a 29 article in the London Business School Review, about which I wrote a piece in my Business Daily column, I'm sure Carol will have read it, Handy advocated a form of learning at business schools that was experience understood in tranquility. Was it like this for you? Experience understood in tranquility. Those most suited for such programs are not necessarily those with the highest academic scores, he felt. His plea for the business school of the future was that it should not provide an overly academic environment, and so faculty selection and promotion too should be based on broader criteria, like even bringing in guys like me as faculty adjunct. Only when the faculty list includes professors of philosophy and drama, education and psychology, will business schools be appropriately equipped for the very different world ahead, he concluded. Sounds like you guys? While my father was enjoying his last years with Shell, I was at university studying economics at UCL, And here both our faculty and my fellow students were from all over the world. Faculty members including a Greek, he was the head of the department, a Brazilian and an American, and among my closest friends were ones from Nigeria, India and Pakistan, plus several from the Midlands of England and the north, up-country folk as we would call them here, the likes of whom I'd never interacted with before until I got to university. During my years as an undergraduate, I was privileged to benefit from several internships with ISEC in France and in America. And I'm delighted that a chapter of ISEC exists here at Strathmore. This international association, which began just for students in economics and commerce, was set up in 1948, and its purpose was to bring young people from Europe together to help the continent reintegrate and heal following the 6-year divisive war. A few weeks ago, ISEC Kenya asked me to speak at their dinner celebrating the 75th anniversary of the organization's founding, where had I thought of Pope Francis's concern for caring for our common home, I would have referred to its uplifting, initiating purpose, that of ISEC. How wonderful that it went global subsequently and more inclusive, and that it is thriving so sustainably after all these years with some wonderful products here in Kenya. My first industrial strength management opportunity came when I was asked by ICL, the British computer company I'd been working for since obtaining my undergraduate degree in 1967, to come and run their subsidiary here. It was still a time when there were many expatriates, not least in this tech field, and the assumption that we guys, yes, in those days it was guys only, from the north would be in charge and we would be the experts. I think I'm the only Mzungu in the room here. The only one with that one of your three hearts. We were the ones to give directions, and we were to be feared. It was what my British bosses expected of me, and pretty much what my Kenyan staff also did. But I refused to buy into that mindset. And it was then that I started working with transactional analysis. I helped my newly promoted Kenyan management team to pursue adult-adult relationships, not the child-parent ones, so still assumed by the neo-colonialists. I encouraged my Kenyan colleagues to see both themselves and others as okay rather than not okay. That's the transactional analysis language, including their bosses and their customers, of whatever age, with however many degrees, and so on. In this way, I promoted an expectation of win-win relationships. I've been working with this adult, okay, win-win trio of mindsets ever since, and hardly a week goes by without me doing so. Indeed, it featured prominently at a workshop I facilitated earlier this week for the senior and middle-level managers of NCCK. I introduced this way of being to my children before they were 10, and more recently to my grandchildren at similar ages. My great-grandson is due for it soon. It's not my genetic one, but it's... For me, it's the best way of helping develop people's self-respect and self-confidence, and more generally, their emotional intelligence. What I firmly believe is that unless we apply such mindsets, we will not be able to develop common homes, and our organizations and our societies will not be sustainable. No, we will assume, as many do, that life is played out in zero-sum games. Either I win or you do. This without appreciating that one way or another, win-lose almost invariably ends up as lose-lose, as we are seeing so tragically with Ukraine and Russia, with Palestine and Israel. I'm delighted to see that as far as dispute resolution is concerned, the win-lose adversarial approach is increasingly giving way, and not least here in Kenya, to arbitration and mediation, which allows for and indeed aims at win-win. My favorite example of someone who expects and works towards win-lose outcomes is Donald Trump. And as we read in his book, The Art of the Deal, he assumed he would always manage to close a deal that left the other party as a loser. But the unintended consequence for him and others like him is that no one ever wants to do business with him again. Or if at all, it is only to get even, to seek revenge. Trump's win-lose transactions preclude win-win relationships from which both parties benefit ongoingly and sustainably. Just to add to my analysis of Trump, I asked myself why he needs to go for win-lose rather than build towards win-win. It's to feed his ego, isn't it? And in transactional analysis terms, it's because his need for win-lose and for I'm okay, you're not okay posturings mask the insecurities of an I'm not okay, you're okay fellow. The concepts of fairness and reasonableness have become much more prominent in recent times. And at the company level, it has moved the mindset from merely benefiting one's shareholders to treating all key stakeholders fairly. For we have come to focus so much more on sustainability, not only for our organizations, but of the environments within which they operate. Unless, as the Pope said, we care for our common home, both your room in the home and mine will suffer, as will often be the case for those who live beyond our home. Unless we go for win-win among all key stakeholders, forget sustainability. Along with this, we have been more and more conscious of the benefits of having an uplifting purpose in what we do. Purpose before profit, we hear. And that's very much what we talk about at Davis and Shirtliff, where I'm a director. And this, along with the 3 Ps of people, planet, yes, and profit, the idea is not to do good at the expense of doing well, but to do well through doing good. It absolutely speaks of taking a longer-term view, for that is what sustainability is all about. Holding back from going for short-term sub-optimization, not being held hostage by what has been called the tyranny of Wall Street, where each quarter's results must exceed those of the previous quarter, but finding the strength to handle gratification deferral with the incentive of disproportionately benefiting from its consequences. This requires saying no when we should. No to customers, suppliers, and others, investors too, with whom we should not engage. No to demands for incentives in order to be awarded contracts or to have government services provided more swiftly, speed money. No to shareholders who just want to minimize costs, generate immediate bottom line growth, and unduly squeeze out benefits. I'm happy to say that many of the organizations with which I interact get the goodness of sustainability, the goodness of behaving responsibly towards the environment, and when engaged in social and governance issues, all of which have been wrapped up in what we now call the ESG system. And I'm not just talking about the Safaricoms and the equity banks and the KCBs. I'm also seeing such responsible mindsets within many SMEs, within family businesses. Not all of them, of course, just like not all the big boys and girls are good big boys and girls. I was recently asked to speak about ESG issues at the KENCTAD conference on that subject, and there I talked about several such companies. One thing they certainly have in common is a goal and assumption of long-term sustainability. So those delivering the eulogy at their graves will be able to speak of their honorable legacies. What I noted was that such organizations are not behaving with a sense of corporate responsibility because they are being told to by moralist observers, not because a regulator is breathing down their necks. No, it is because of the values lived by them. Their owners, their directors, their managers, and the staff they attract. Let me now move from talking about our common homes in the private sector to our national home. In the 1990s, the World Bank encouraged countries around the world to develop country strategic plans through producing PRSPs, Poverty Reduction Strategy Papers. Kenya was among them, and 8 sector working groups were formed, one for each of the key sectors of the economy. For the first time, ICT was identified as a sector on its own, and I was invited to be the private sector representative, with then Transport and Communication PS Titus Naikuni as our chairman. Our team came up with Kenya's first ever national ICT strategy and policy, which provided for an enabling national home for this fast emerging industry. PRSP was succeeded by the Economic Recovery Strategy, and at a milestone meeting in Mombasa in February of that year, the ERS draft was presented by Harris Mule, the late now, and David Ndii, the still noisy, to government officers, development partners, and private sector representatives, of whom I was one representing ICT. It was on the sidelines of this meeting that then Planning Minister Anyang' Nyong'o met with the private sector folk attending and told us the government needed us to come together and speak with one voice. It was this that led to the founding of KEPSA, which until today is the common home for the private sector. I was a founder director, later its vice chairman, and until today I'm a member of its advisory council. Now as then, I believe passionately in its mandate and also in its style of constructive engagement, win-win engagement with the government. Not always, but where at all possible. The recent CAM shocker went a bit for win-lose. it's I'm okay, you're not okay. And KEPSA not only looks for win-win with government, but within and between sectors too, journeying towards long-term sustainability, creating that enabling environment, that level playing field, which speaks of an ethical and high-trust environment. Now, joining business member organizations is voluntary. If you're a manufacturer, no one says you must join CAM. If you're in the flower business, you only join the Kenya Flower Council if you wish to. And by and large, the consequence is that it is the good guys who enroll. They are the ones who want a level playing field, where the highest performers do best. For the tenderpreneurs, this is the last thing they want, and they don't join. So my appeal to those of you who are in the private sector is not only to join, but to be active in your business member associations. It is good for your company and for your sector, and it is good for you and your personal growth. In short, it shows that you care for the higher levels of your common home. Joining groups with common interest does not only apply to those in the private sector, an obvious example being professional associations. If you are a doctor or an engineer, an accountant or a lawyer, in whichever environment, contribute to the well-being of your profession and enjoy the benefits of doing so. I look back with such good memories of my time around 20 years ago on the council of the Kenya Institute of Management, and for some years as its chairman. I learned so much while helping to place positive leadership on the national agenda, just as I did through promoting the ICT cause at that time. Currently, I'm a member of the Ethics Committee of the Blue Company, which attracts members who commit to neither give nor receive bribes. They then inhabit a common home of trustworthy organizations with whom it is safe to transact. For as the title of Stephen Covey's son's book, The Speed of Trust, summed it up, where there is trust, it is quicker and costs less to do business with one another. Good relationships will be sustained, and through that the businesses will be sustainable. To revert to my opening theme, there will be less waste of time and money. If you are not in government, do think of having your organization become a member of the Blue Company, as what is needed is critical mass, that greater coalition of the willing. It is why the Blue Company, like the UN Global Compact, has partnered with KEPSA and others. And just a few weeks ago, I invited one of the Blue Company founder directors, Julius Kipingetich, who you know well in Strathmore, to speak to our Rotary Club of Nairobi, where I've been a member since 1978, about its role. While with us, he enjoyed hearing our Rotary four-way test. Of the things we say, think, say, or do, I can never remember it. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it bring goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? Not a bad collection for a common home. Consider also becoming certified by the Global Compact. 3 weeks ago at the book launch of the collection of my articles on ESG and Professor Michael Hopkins' book, CSR and Sustainability, he and I formed part of a panel to discuss these topics. Another panelist was Flora Mutai, the immediate past chair of KEPSA and director of the Global Compact, both here in Kenya and globally. And she spoke eloquently about its broader appeal of issues that promote sustainability beyond anti-corruption, for it encourages businesses to also behave responsibly vis-à-vis the environment, human rights, and labour standards. I moderated the launch of its Kenya chapter in 2017, and since then I've been pleased to see how it has gathered momentum as a force for good in this country. In my time, I have become involved in a number of national peace-building and conflict resolution initiatives, the first of which was in 2004, when a team of us from the private sector offered to mediate between President Kibaki and his people and his coalition partner, Raila, and his. The problem was that Kibaki's side was not keeping to some aspects of the MOU it had signed with Raila prior to the 2002 election. The consequence? The coalition government ministers were being distracted by the resulting feuds between the two factions and was taking its eye off caring for our common home. They had committed to create an enabling environment for the private sector, but due to their internal frictions, they were unable to focus on the jobs for which they had been elected. For 3 months, we listened and we nudged, but no progress was made. We warned the president and his team that unless they softened their position and allowed for a return to win-win, it was how we expressed it, allowed for a return to win-win, the consequences would be severe. In the PowerPoint presentation we made to them, we spelt out that holding on to their win-lose stance would prevent them from seeing through the 2005 referendum on the Constitution. They would face challenges in the next election of 2007, and there could well be civil unrest, much of which Francis Mudhaura writes about in his recently published memoir, A Moving Horizon. We know what happened. The referendum failed, and the 2008 post-election violence erupted following the contentious poll. So sad, so unnecessary, so predicted by us in 2004. It is why I am pleased to be an advisor to the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, which was set up as a consequence of those turbulent days. Before the last election, I connected NCIC to KEPSA's Kenya Daima program to encourage peaceful and responsible behavior before, during, and after the vote. And this is the kind of collaboration I'm always on the lookout for promoting. I'd like to think that in what I am saying here, I am preaching to the converted. Otherwise, why would you have chosen to participate in your executive programs at Strathmore Business School, whose mission statement is to develop ethical and transformational leaders through doing what it does? You have been empowered to reach the next level of your transformational leadership. And my challenge to you is to make full use of that gift, not only for your organization and yourself, but way beyond that. You will achieve much more if you pursue your transformational passions with fellow sustainability champions, be they in business and professional member organizations, the Global Compact, the Blue Company, or Rotary, be they in partnership with the good people in government, of whom there are many, or in NGOs, civil society, whatever. And of course, make your contributions to and benefit from Strathmore Business School, now as its alumni. We need such collaboration and synergy among those who possess an uplifting purpose if we are to create that critical mass of responsible transformation leaders, that coalition of the willing who can significantly and sustainably influence our society. EACC Chairman Bishop David Oginde recently described Kenya as a valueless society. I think it's an overgeneralization, as my assessment is that, as elsewhere, we have a whole spectrum, from the really good to the really awful, Bishop Oginde's Matatu culture characters, with many in between. Our challenge is to move the needle towards the positive end of the spectrum, and not as isolated individuals, but as members of organizations that in turn partner with as many other organizations as possible. As I have felt ever since I arrived here in Kenya nearly 50 years ago, this is a country of amazing potential. And it is precisely people like you who can contribute towards that uplifting goal. Ladies and gentlemen, as you emerge from your tranquil times in Strathmore, some months ago, I'm sure you are well prepared to be even more impactful champions of sustainability as you care for our common homes. Otherwise, why would you have wanted to mingle here? Thank you.